Hi, my name's Phil and I like talking about politics, and I've teased for a few days the fact that I wanted to talk about something that, although I don't think likely, is something that is very much on the cards, a huge shake-up in British politics. And I don't think it's just me thinking about it. There's people talking about this in hushed tones around the country. But first of all, I sort of said that I would do this video on the day when it was relatively quiet. There has been a vote of no confidence in the government. Ordinarily, you would think that would be a big news day, but of course it hasn't. I'm just doing that now, having watched the vote come in. As expected, it was a win for the government. It was always going to be. It would have, to me, been extraordinary had it not. It required Conservative MPs to vote their own party, not necessarily definitely out of government, because they could have still won the next general election. In fact, it's possible that some of them would have had confidence that they'd win the general election by a greater margin than they did the last one and get themselves their majority back. But the timing of it is to attack their own party when it's down, and, well, it's going to make an even bigger mess of Brexit. So we're back on to where we were last night. The deal is not on. We don't have enough time to negotiate another deal. The EU has said that it will not extend Article 50 to countenance another deal. And I'm not saying there's no other outcome here, but at the moment it seems difficult to envisage more than one of two outcomes. And they are both the most extreme outcomes. On the one hand, the default position is that we crash out of the EU on the 29th of March with no deal. Parliament is overwhelmingly opposed to this. I was saying on a comment today, you might be forgiven for not realising this, but that is because Theresa May, in a vain attempt to keep the two halves of her party together, has been appeasing the far right mad Brexiteers. And when I say mad, I don't mean mad as in, I mean very angry, very angry Brexiteers. Simply because they are the ones who threaten a split in the party. They are the ones who say, whether they would or not is questionable, but they are the ones who say they are willing to see the party split over this issue. Now, that draws an interesting parallel with a few years ago. I have made no secret of the fact that I am a big Labour supporter, but I am not a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. And he and his supporters have said that they are willing to see the Labour Party split for the sake of keeping the leadership in their hands, or the hands of those who share their exact beliefs. This creates a very strange situation. You've now got the more moderate members of both the Conservatives and Labour who are disenfranchised from their own party. The more moderate members of the Conservative Party have been sidelined through this entire process. The more moderate members of Labour, the same thing. In fact, there was a little bit of hypocrisy yesterday. And, I know politicians do this. They have to score their political points. Jeremy Corbyn stood up in the wake of the defeat yesterday and said that any other Prime Minister facing such a defeat would have resigned. Not unreasonably, based on the idea that any Prime Minister that has faced defeats far less severe have indeed resigned. But it was only the last Parliament when he faced a much higher proportion of his own MPs rebelling against his leadership, and he didn't resign. His attitude was, of course, that the ground support for Labour, the grassroots as we would call it, would return him as leader. They want him to be leader, which turned out to be perfectly true. And so you could argue he was totally entitled to do that. Theresa May say the same thing. She may say that the grassroots support of the Conservatives, I don't know, would recognise that there is no candidate that can unite the party. The MPs are on a collision course here. Actually, a collision course would suggest they're moving towards each other. A divergent course, maybe, is the better way of looking at it. So what it means is you've got lots of centre-right MPs in the Conservative Party, lots of centre-left MPs in the Labour Party. And very recently, Parliament has been behaving in a way that's most unlike a Parliament. And I was watching an interview with a Scottish billionaire today who was talking about the fact that, particularly in his business and other business as well, this lack of certainty of what's going on, the lack of a plan in terms of what's going to happen makes it extremely difficult because they have to plan for their future over the next few months. And he said, without giving any details, his company has to announce a multi-million-pound investment tomorrow. They can't put it off any longer. I don't know whether the implication to that was supposed to be that that investment will now be in a non-UK EU country, whereas it might have otherwise been within the UK. But another thing he said, and this is what I disagreed with him on, he said that Westminster's been behaving very badly. I would argue the opposite. I would argue that the leadership of the two major parties, the Conservatives and Labour, have been playing to party politics. Theresa May, everything she has done has been in a vain effort to prevent her party splitting. The referendum in the first place, which of course was not her fault, David Cameron's, was to stop the party splitting. And what has it done? It has actually created a much larger chasm within the two halves of that party than ever existed before. As was always going to be the case, it's very highly polarised. But Jeremy Corbyn also, when his MPs, or a great many of his MPs, want him to support a referendum, when the party conference said, if you've exhausted all other options, we need another referendum, when the grassroots are demanding a referendum, when his own cult, Momentum, the group within Labour that supports Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, when they say they want another referendum and he's resisting, he's playing his own party politics. He's brought this vote of no confidence. Okay, you could argue he was sort of trapped into it last night, but it was quite clear he already intended to deliver a vote of no confidence. It was a wasted day today, a completely wasted day. We had 5 or 6 hours of debates, very interesting in parts, but it didn't change anything. We knew what the result was going to be. It was an absolute nonsense. Today was a day when Theresa May was supposed to go to Brussels to meet with people in the EU. I don't imagine anything would have come of it, but we'd have known that nothing was going to come of it. We still now might have people who think something may come of it. She's still got to come back next Monday and explain what the plan B is. Jeremy Corbyn should be getting behind another referendum, and he's not. So the leaderships are both taking party political decisions. But the backbenchers of all parties, but in particular Labour and the Conservatives, have been working together. They have worked together to frustrate the government's plans to try and railroad things through. They have worked together to prevent Theresa May being allowed 3 weeks to basically let us all sweat while she comes back and says what she wants to do next. They've cut that down to 3 sitting days. And it's the backbenchers who ultimately have delivered this verdict on the deal that was presented yesterday. Well, it was presented a while ago, but voted on yesterday. And I've been increasingly thinking about this, and I'm thinking to myself, I always say the government that wins power, the party that wins power as government, is the one that captures the centre ground. I'm left-wing. There's a number of left-wing policies that I want any Labour government to enact. But I also understand that not all of those policies, although people in the centre are not opposed to them, it doesn't help them necessarily. Okay, those sorts of people want the policies that will also help them, and there are ones that are perfectly in keeping with Labour policies that do that. And it's not a concession. I believe that socialist policies make almost everybody more productive, happier and wealthier because it shares the wealth ultimately. But Jeremy Corbyn refuses to capture the centre ground. He refuses to explain to people in the centre how they will benefit from a Labour government. And with Theresa May, even though she is more moderate, she is centre-right as opposed to far-right, everything she has done has been for the far-right. Take the backstop, for example. We shouldn't need the backstop. That is the thing that basically sunk the deal. But we shouldn't need it. The only reason we need it is because we have this ridiculous situation where Theresa May is trying to appeal to the people who insist on a hard border between the UK and the EU. But we cannot have anything other than an open border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. That means we cannot have a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. We means we can't have one between the UK and the EU. Now, the majority of Parliament are quite happy for us to be in a customs union, to have a close relationship with the EU. That means that the border situation would remain much as it is now. It would basically mean a soft Brexit, which would mean effectively we would enjoy all the benefits of being in the EU. We wouldn't get a say. We'd have to pay more money for it. But in all other respects, life could carry on as normal. In fact, the people of the EU may even prefer that, because it means we don't send people like Nigel Farage off to the European Parliament to cause trouble. But that's not what she's done. So although Theresa may be more moderate, she's moving to the right. Not herself, but she's appealing to the far right because she doesn't want it to split. She believes that her own moderate core of the Conservative Party won't force the split because it's the far right that are threatening to split. In Labour, it's the far left that are threatening to split. What if it was the moderates that split? This has happened recently in Europe. Something similar, maybe not quite on this scale. What if these centre-right Conservatives and the centre-left Labour Party, through working together, realising their strength, deciding that they can find solutions together, that they can work together, what if they decided that what this country needs is a centrist party? One that doesn't have the far right to cause trouble, cause schisms. One that doesn't have the far left to do the same. One that will largely agree. Obviously, you get any two intelligent people to talk at any length about anything, they will at some point disagree. But how frustrating must it be for them when they are in a party that is completely fighting over its own identity because of such a range of people along this political spectrum in both the Conservative and the Labour Party? How much easier might it seem to them to form a party of moderates, especially as they now know they can work together? A party that would probably do very well in elections because, as I say, the way to win elections is to capture the centre ground. Such a split in the Conservative Party, of course, would attract even more far-right people, supporters, politicians to what remains of the Conservative Party. How ironic would it be if the Conservative Party split wasn't with the far right going off and making their own party, but the far right being left on their own as the Conservative Party? How ironic for Labour if they lose all of the MPs who are the people who ultimately get them into government every now and then, because they are the ones who appeal to large amounts of people who do go to the polling stations. And I think about this, and as I say, I'm not saying it's likely. I don't see signs of it being likely. But it is plausible. It is plausible. You can see the advantages to people who are clustered around the right, of the centre of politics, sorry. You can see the ones who would see the benefit because you've got 4/5 of Labour MPs who do not support what Jeremy Corbyn is doing. And it's not that he's not their ideal leader. He is the very furthest thing from their ideal leader. Not only does he want to enact policies that they are not at all happy with, but he doesn't even get them into power. Their seats are dependent on a strong leader with a good, strong showing in a general election. And the problem was, of course, that everyone kept saying how great a job Jeremy Corbyn did of the last election. But he lost it. Who on earth? I cannot remember the last time I heard anyone say that the leader of an opposition did a great job in a general election when they remained the leader of the opposition after that election. I cannot remember ever hearing that. They sometimes got to remain. I'm not saying they always had to resign, but they never got told they did a great job. But he didn't. He lost it. He just wasn't as bad as many people thought he would be. Give him his credit. But Theresa May also, and it just shows the fact she's a moderate and yet she's trying to appeal to the far right. Why is that? It just shows that there is already this schism. The party has already effectively split. It's done everything apart from sign the divorce papers. But if it was the Conservative Party alone that was to split, the two parties that will remain, maybe they think to themselves, okay, neither one would be large enough to win a general election in its own right to become a government of one party. Maybe they think they'd be able to form a coalition and each get their agenda pushed forward. But I don't think that would be true. I've often said, I can't prove this, but I've often thought that the reason why the Conservatives are in power for so much of our time in the UK is really because they don't split the vote with anyone. Whereas Labour do. Labour split the vote with other moderate parties such as the Liberal Democrats, for example. Whereas the Conservatives don't. They are the only serious right-wing party. UKIP, had a very small share of the popular vote. It's going to surely have a smaller proportion next time. It's never returned an MP. So, they don't really split the vote with anyone. I mean, there are always undecideds that one election may vote Labour, one election may vote Conservatives, because, again, they are round the centre. But those two parties, if they were split up and the electorate looked to them and thought neither of those parties is going to win power, I wonder just how many people in this country vote for whichever party they think has a realistic chance, as opposed to necessarily which party best suits them. Maybe some people, and I know some people don't, but I don't know how many, don't like the idea of voting for a party that's not going to be able to form a government anyway. After all, what's the point in having a manifesto if you cannot enact it? And the only way you can enact it is to form a government. So maybe they wouldn't. So maybe these centre-right people might approach the people in Labour who are being disenfranchised and maybe seen for a good long time that leadership of the Labour Party will not return to the centre-left. And I have to say, from my personal point of view, where Jeremy Corbyn is on that spectrum is roundabout where I am. Yes, there are policies he wishes to pursue that I do not and I oppose very strongly. But by and large, his vision for the UK is one that I would share. My main problem with him is not his policies. I know too many people vote for politicians because of what they say they will do. I try and focus on what I think they will do. And that is a combination of what they say, what I think their true motives are, and what they're capable of. I find it very difficult, if not impossible, to ever vote for an incompetent politician. I don't care how laudable their policies are. If they are not capable of carrying them out, what good is it to me? So personally, if this did happen, I'd actually be left sort of without a home, because my fear is that the Labour Party would slide more to the left, especially if it accepted the fact that it would only ever be an opposition party and would never, much like the Liberal Democrats have been in the past, would never possibly get into government, except possibly as part of a coalition. Then it becomes a party of opposition in a very real sense. It designs its policies deliberately just to try and sneak in a few things if it can form a coalition somewhere if necessary. I wouldn't be able to join the centrist party because I'm not really a centrist voter. But so many are. And that's why I always say you need to capture the centre ground to win an election, to win a majority in this country. It's interesting. There's so many things. I mean, this country, come what may now, I think it's very difficult that we could all wake up in a year's time and think, "Whew, that was a heady few years, but it's all back to normal now." I don't think it can ever get back to normal as I've known it. The question is, are we going to change radically, almost revolution style? Or is it going to be more moderate? Because we could end up with a double whammy of a no-deal Brexit and then those people in those parties being so pissed off that they do split from those parties that they blame, or at least the parts of those parties they blame, and form their own party. Independently or together, I think together is more likely. We are heading for very, very interesting times. And yeah, let me know what you think anyway. Let me know what you think. In the comments below, of course. I hope you found this video a little bit interesting, a little bit of a distraction from Brexit, even though it kept cropping up. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content, click the bell notification, share with other people who might also be interested. And until next time, I'll see you later.